So, Harrison Price from Wall Center. In today's Bodog poll question, we're asking you, are you rooting for Roberto Luongo in the Stanley Cup final? Yes or no? You can vote at Harrison Price on Twitter. Bodog, your source for casino games, poker strategy, and sports odds. And, love when Bodog does these hockey specials. And many of them are on the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Listen to this, Blake. Mitch Marner to Vancouver this summer, getting 7.5 to 1. Willie Nylander to the Canucks this summer, 6 to 1 if you're so inclined. And our boy Lawrence Gilman, next GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, 9 to 1 on your Bodog line of the day.
I think LG will take those odds. Those aren't bad odds.
No, 9 to 1. I would have thought he was. I mean, he's on the board. Put it that way, alongside some other names there for the vacancy. One day, maybe this next guy will be in hockey management. If it's not in hockey broadcasting, it's in hockey management. It's former Vancouver Canuck Frank Corrado, TSN hockey analyst. How you doing, fella?
Good. How you doing? I don't think I'm in the running for any kind of executive job ever.
No,
ever.
no. You haven't dared to sort of dream what it would be like to be a hockey executive?
No. I've seen what those guys go through. I can't remember who it was. It was one of the executives that was a former player and looked at us and said, "You guys have no idea how good you have it, because when you guys leave the rink, you're done for the day. And we don't get to do that. We are working all day. We never leave."
No, the schedule and particularly these days now, like, you know,
they don't get bags.
We used to joke about, you know, the NHL taking August off. Really, if you're a manager, and Brad for a Living has told us this a bunch, because we ask him, you know, "Hey, Brad, how often do you get to your place in the Okanagan?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I have a great 10 days every year there, and the rest of the time my family's enjoying it, and I'm out working."
It's crazy because, like, I'll finish a panel or I'll finish calling a game, and it's like, I'm done with it. Like, I take my notes. They're all on my computer. So I take my notes, I put them right in the recycling bin, and I am gone out the door within 8 minutes.
Yeah. And we also say you're undefeated too.
Yeah, that's
a sparkling record.
You never lose a game in media.
You never lose a game. Yeah.
How much did you get to know Roberto Luongo as you two guys crossed over here? Tell me the good Italian boy from Montreal took the good Italian boy from Toronto under his wing at some point during your Canucks overlap.
You know what? So I was obviously very, very young, and he was at the point in his career where he was very established. And like when I came into that dressing room, it was like there's an aura around this guy because of who he is, what he's done, and just his general presence. So it was almost like, not that I was intimidated, but it wasn't like I was going up to him like leading with conversation. But if I could chime in every once in a while on something that was going on, I thought that was really cool. And he always gave me the time of day, and I thought that was awesome. We actually shared a mutual friend who I know you guys would know, Slav, and he was the Easton rep at the time, and he's passed away during my time in Vancouver. So he was really good friends with Roberto. I was really good friends with Slav as well. So, and Kevin Bieksa, we were all like tight with Slav. So that was like the, you know, maybe you grab a coffee, meet Slavy for a coffee, maybe, you know, Roberto would show up or Kev would show up, or it was just one of those things. It was almost like he was the social juggernaut for all of that. Like he was the facilitator for it. But I think even myself at the rink most days, maybe I said at times a little too much, where I should have just been like, "Hey, you're a kid, show up, like just do what you need to do, and don't look a lot of people in the eye, and just have fun on the ice and go home." But you know, like he was always really nice to me, and it was never really like inside jokes on Italian kind of things. Like it's interesting. It's interesting with Lou because, you know, he comes across as this like jokester, which he certainly is, but he took his craft very seriously. Like at the rink, whether it was a practice day or a game day, like he was very dialed in and locked in, and that obviously led to his success. So that's one thing that sticks out about my brief time being around him in the dressing room.
Well, we saw him blossom into sort of that jokester once he kind of got unmasked as Strombone 1. Do you think he blossomed behind closed doors a little bit more too? Do you think he let his hair down with the media? Certainly, we saw that transition. from what you understand, even, do you think that happened behind closed doors as well? That maybe he was more jokery later in his career?
I think like with the guys that were maybe that you could have those kinds of fun and games with, like for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like if he was talking to the Twins, I think you could sense that same kind of tone that he tweets with. Like you could sense that in his tone of voice. But really, for me, it was more just like it stuck out to me. Like, man, this guy. It seems like he's a jokester, but he's very focused and he's very determined on what he does. And it's almost like not that he was quiet or silent, but that's part of what drove him to be the goaltender he was. Because hey, like you're playing arguably the hardest position in the game in a Canadian market, and at the time, very high expectations on the Canucks, and you know how much noise was surrounding the team in that era. And for him to be able to do what he did, like I think that takes a certain kind of mindset, and he was really sharp, really dialed in that way. And I don't know if like maybe the Twitter was a cool way to like release some of that, you know. But yeah, you can definitely sense like the sarcasm and the quick-wittedness around some of the older guys on the team for sure.
Yeah, there was no gray area with Lou. It was either the sort of quieter, more focused, deadly serious competitor, or was the jokester, the guy, you know, talking about fantasy football and taking your money and all that. Speaking of, did he take your money in fantasy football or in any
No,
kind of
I've actually
cards?
never even played fantasy football, and I never played cards at the NHL level because those games were a little too rich for my salary.
Well done.
I've played in the American Hockey League where things are a little more reasonable, let's say.
Smaller antes.
Yeah, but I never played fantasy football. I'm actually playing fantasy baseball for the second year in a row, and I don't know how people do this because you have to like pay so much attention to your lineup, and you're constantly making changes, and you think your catcher's playing, and then he's not playing, and it's outrageous. Fantasy baseball is completely outrageous.
Yeah, especially if there's a minor league component to it. Did you ever get glared at by Lou? Because there was a time in his career where he didn't sort of hide his distaste if a defenseman made a mistake in front of him.
I don't think I ever got glared at, not that I know of. But if you looked at my plus minus during my time with the Canucks, like there's a very good chance that I did get glared at and was completely at fault for more than one goal. So I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't blame any goaltender, whether it was Lou or Schneider or Eddie Lack or Ryan Miller. Like they probably should have glared at me, and probably more than that as well.
Well, and frankly, it was the glares, but also some of the self-deprecating humor that would fall flat after losses that really got Lou in trouble with fans here. Like fans really disliked when he would glare at the defenseman, and that is where sort of the Strombone one and sort of the lighter side of Lou started to get pulled out. And a big credit here goes to TC Carling and the Canucks communication staff at the time, because I think they sat him down and basically said, like, Lou, like, you're this incredible person and personality. You got to start showing that to the fans. And boy, did he ever.
By the way, before we leave this topic, do you think ice hockey goalies, as I call it, should behave like soccer goalies? Should they just stop being so restrained and just yell at the skaters?
I think they should. Yeah, I think they should just be lunatics. I think just fully embrace it and be lunatics and yell and smash your stick, because like if you're holding something back and you're in net and you're thinking, I would love to smash my stick right now, or I would love to just go nuts, like you're thinking about that. The only thing you should be thinking about is stopping the puck. So whatever you need to do to clear your brain out and just focus on the puck. This is, classic like guys chirping each other in the dressing room, right? Yeah. And you would never say this in the heat of battle, but you would say it like on a practice day or something, like, hey bud, like one job, stop the puck. Like, you guys literally got one job. That's it. And like, by the way, I would never say that to a veteran goaltender of that stature or caliber ever in a million years. And I don't know who in their right mind would, but more I'm just talking like, in the minors or, young goalie, stuff like that. Like you're having some fun. It's like, hey bud, one job. That's all you got.
I got to say, Frankie here is pretty well. Like Senator Corrado is going to be a hell of a politician someday when he's done with this hockey broadcasting stuff. Just before we leave that era of Canucks hockey, Frank, BX is pushing Gillis for the Toronto GM opening. What do you think?
I think it would be fantastic. I think Mike Gillis was doing things 10 years ago that people still aren't doing when it comes to how to run a franchise and the resources that he had available for players and his kind of forward thinking mentality. It's crazy to think that he hasn't had a job this whole time. And it would be interesting to see, like, now with the way things have gone and how much technology has advanced, like how much more advanced would he be in his approach now compared to 10 years ago? And that's what would excite me about it. But yeah, like I heard Kevin talking about that, and he's not wrong. Like he really isn't. I think he's like, Mike is the kind of guy who would have a plan put in place. And let's be honest, like not every general manager bats 1,000. Like there's been a lot of talk here in Toronto about Kyle Dubas and the job he did. And it seems like people have chosen a side. You're either Team Shanny or you're Team Kyle. And that's fine. Like, I get that. It seems like very high school gossipy kind of breakup situation. He said, she said. But at the end of the day, Kyle did some really good things. Kyle made some mistakes, just like Lou Lamoriello has made mistakes. And Brad Treliving is a name that comes up. And like, here's a great example. Brad Treliving, the hand he was dealt last year with Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, for him to do what he did with that situation, thought he did a really good job, right? Like that's great. That's a feather in his cap. But the fact that it got to that point because he bridged players, like that's against you, right? So all these GMs, they have hits and misses, is what I'm trying to say. And Mike Gillis is no different. Mike Gillis did a lot of great stuff in Vancouver. He also missed on some things. Like, let's be honest. So there were some things. Yeah. They didn't draft well for the longest time. And by the time they had their ducks in a row as far as their drafting department, he was let go, and he wasn't able to see that through. And then there were also some trades that you sit there and say, okay, like, why did you make that trade? But you're always, at the end of the day, you're always trying to do what's best for your team, and you try and make objective decisions. And that's what Mike does and what he did. And he built a fantastic department, program, whatever you want to call it. I'll always remember this. Coming to my first development camp with the Vancouver Canucks and going into training camp that year, you could tell there was a Canucks way of doing things. And it was unique to them. And there was like a Canucks way. And you talk to other people and players, and it was like there was a kind of like a Red Wings way of doing things. And there was a lot of teams that were kind of just stuck in the muck, basically. But knowing that, like as a young player, when you get drafted into a program, that this is how we do things and we believe in it, and if you follow this path, we're going to lead to this kind of promised land idea. Like it's very it's good for players to have that, and it's good for people within the program to have that. It has belief, like people can get behind it. And that's what he did such a good job of.
Mike's strong-willed. The only problem I could see is just that, like, Shanny's got a plan. At least that's the word around town.
Yeah, what's the plan now?
It's the Shanna. It's the Shanna plan. But
right, but what is the plan now? Because I would argue that there isn't a plan. Because if you got rid of Kyle Dubas, but it wasn't hockey related or like results related, then the plan is off. Like there's no plan now because you've gone rogue essentially. So I don't know what the plan is here. I would imagine though, similar to how Kyle Dubas would have liked things a little more streamlined, Mike Gillis is not going to step into a situation where he's not that he has to answer to people, but he's not going to step into a situation where he can't do what he needs to do and what his vision would be.
Hard to believe Lamoriello, Shanahan, and Dubas were all there at one point.
And Dubas, of course, was a young AGM that they were hoping.
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of worked exactly as they anticipated. And then whatever happened this year between Shanahan and Dubas. Chicago's looking to move up from number 19 in the draft. The Canucks have been targeted at number 11, according to reports there out of the Windy City, because that's the one team that might actually be interested in moving down. And for the reasons of shedding some contract and creating some cap space, they're the one team that's already over next year's limit, Frankie. You watch a lot of junior hockey. You talk to me about the difference between number 11 and number 19 and whether you think it would be wise for the Canucks to explore to trade down if it could mean getting some cap relief this summer.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's going to be a seismic difference between 11 and 19 this year. Like, I really think that the top guys, whether it's like Bedard is in a league of his own, but like Fantilli, Carlson, like they're very much of that same caliber of what they can do for a franchise. And I would even argue like Mitchkov is in there as well, but there's a lot of uncertainty as far as when he's able to actually come over, and like there's just a lot of noise around him. But once you start getting into like 10 through to 20, like I'll throw some names at you, like Colby Barlow, the kid out of Owen Sound. Like he's a very complete defenseman. Like I think Craig Button has him at 8 or 9 on his list. And then you start getting into some names like, we talked about Zach Benson a lot this year. Then there's Cohen Ziemer, the kid out in Prince George. And then like Samuel Honzik is right in that mix as well. I think Craig Button has him at 18. Like when I start looking at those players, Benson stands out because of his playmaking ability and how dynamic he is. But like then, you know, as far as Braden Yeager, like there's a lot of guys right in that vicinity, and those are just the forwards. Like the Austrian defenseman, he's a really good, well-rounded player. I really like the Swedish kid, Sandin Pellikka. Yeah, like he was really impressive for me this year. So like there's a lot of players in that vicinity that are going to make the same kind of impact, right? It really depends. Like if there's someone that you think might slip a little bit, like Zach Benson could, like, I know a lot of people talk about him in like a very high regard for sure, but I could see him like slipping I don't know, 11, 12, like he could be there. I wouldn't be surprised, but you never know who's going to sneak up and grab a guy. But I guess like for me, the moral of the story is this: between 11 and 19, it's not going to be a drastic change for whoever's picking there. It just really depends. Maybe you really want that defenseman, Sandin Pellikka, and maybe that kind of guy is not going to be there at 19. That's the only thing. Like as far as the forwards go, I think there's a lot of similarities, but that Reinbacker, I think it is, and Sandin Pellikka, those are the two D-men, and I think after that it's going to drop off quite a bit.
Frank, you've played at a World Championships. We got a bunch of Canucks who are doing great things over there in Finland and Latvia. Artur Silovs, the goalies, won 5 straight starts going into the quarterfinal against Sweden. Connor Garland's more than a point per game for a U.S. team that hasn't lost. And Tyler Myers, 2 straight player of the games for the Canadian side, and Ethan Bear is there with him. How much can a World Championships help the following season in the NHL?
Well, first of all, that's very nice that you think I played in a World Championships. Unfortunately, I didn't.
Oh.
Yeah.
My bad, Frank. I'll put
did.
myself on E's and O's.
Okay, it's very nice of you. I would have liked to. I think it would have been fun. But I think it does do something for guys. Like I know guys that have gone over to that tournament and maybe the season wasn't the season they were hoping for. Like maybe it was one of those years where no confidence, the points weren't really coming, you didn't like your ice time, and you went over there and you finally felt you could play that role that you think you should have, right? Whether it was like playing a little more power play or just being relied upon a little bit more. And let's be honest, some of the competition you're going to play against there is not exactly NHL elite caliber. Like you're going to play against the Hungaries of the world and the Frances of the world. And you just build a little bit of confidence there, and you go into your summer training, and then you see some guys come back the next year and it's like, man, this guy, like he found something. Like it seems like he did. It can be the difference between having a subpar season and going into your summer training and having that lingering in the back of your head, or going into your summer training feeling good, feeling confident, and trying to kind of, find that for next season. It's more on an individual level as an individual player. You know what I mean? So it can bring out something in you that maybe you didn't find during the regular season, and you go back and you're like, okay, I found that confidence. Like I know it's there, right? It's just like Maddie. Yeah, just like Maddie, when you make a bunch of 10-footers on the putting green, on the practice green after your round, after you didn't make any in the round, and you're like, I know next round I got those 10-footers. They're ready to rock.
Neither one of us knows that feeling.
As Blake can attest, 10-foot and in, that's my game.
Okay.
Everything else, struggle. But 10-foot and in, that's usually my game.
For a Canadian player or an American player in particular, if you've been on a team that hasn't won that much, even if you don't win a gold medal, just to go over there and win 6-7 games out of the 10 that you play might feel pretty good, right? Just send you in with a better taste in your mouth.
And to actually play games that will have something on the line, right? Yeah. It's a short tournament, so every game means a little more something there. Like the things that I did do with Hockey Canada, like I've been to some camps. I was obviously at the World Juniors camp. And the one thing they do stress the whole time you're there is like, you need to come together quickly as a group, because as quickly as these tournaments start, they end. And I think that goes with what you're saying about the games mean something, and they mean something quickly, and it's not going to last long. So yeah, there is something like, if you're a team that's out of the playoffs by Christmas and you're just dragging your feet month after month, just waiting for the season to finish, now you're like, I'm playing for something. And it's pretty cool. Like, I've never represented Canada, but I think it would be pretty damn cool to wear your country's jersey and have that feeling. So yeah, I can definitely do something for guys.
Well, I mean, if you moved into executive work, then you could wear the Hockey Canada blazer one day, Corrado. Okay.
Yeah,
I know I'm trying to put you on the ice, but I could put you in the executive suite if things keep going.
They might have a better chance of going to one of these tournaments as a broadcaster one day. So we'll see. Yeah.
Ask Dave Tomlinson. Yeah, ask Dave Tomlinson about the Worlds as the color guy. I think it's great fun, particularly.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, they've been to, Paris and Prague, and it's a pretty good gig. 2.5 weeks in one of the better cities.
Dave could get into trouble though too, so just be careful. Yeah.
Frankie, marvelous stuff. Have a great week. You're off for a couple of weeks here now, if I'm not mistaken, right? So we'll catch up with you later in June.
I'll catch up with you guys later in June. Maddie, keep nailing those 10-footers, buddy. They're coming around.
Yep. Thank you, sir.